In the 21st century, human beings are masters of the planet. Behind us lie 10,000 years of civilization, bending nature to our will. And it all started with one great invention. Not the wheel, not the car, not the plane. The greatest invention of all was beer.
Beer has changed the course of human history, not once, not twice, but over and over again, right from the very beginning.
It sowed the world's first farmlands.
The agricultural revolution came about because of the imperative, the need to make beer.
It hewed the world's first wonders.
We wouldn't have the pyramids if it weren't for beer.
Beer established modern healthcare.
Beer and science go hand in hand.
And beer shaped America.
Beer is the secret history of America. It's in our DNA.
It even ended one of history's great scandals.
Beer was part, if not all, of the motivation for ending child labor.
And most important of all, it gave us something to drink while watching the ball game. This is the story of the greatest invention of all time.
It's an amazing story, and one that really hasn't been told.
Until now.
Without beer, we'd probably still be living in caves.
Human beings like us have been around for about 100,000 years. For the first 90,000, we were nomads, hunter-gatherers. All we had to worry about was food.
The life of a hunter-gatherer is probably not as hard as some people would think. They spend about 2 hours a day gathering grains and hunting, and they spend a lot of time socializing.
Then, in 9000 BC, something happened that changed the world forever. In the Middle East, hunter-gatherers stopped wandering and started farming. They swapped caves for houses and created the first civilization, Mesopotamia. It was the beginning of the world as we know it. Historians call it the agricultural revolution. But the question is, why did it happen? We asked at the local pub.
Women.
Pumpkins. Potatoes. He just got tired of moving rocks.
I have no idea. I don't know.
In fact, the agricultural revolution was started by barley. For years, experts assumed it was to make bread. But now there's a new theory that has shaken the world of science.
The agricultural revolution is all about beer, and beer is all about barley.
For food scientist Dr. Patrick Hayes, it's an open and shut case.
There's no doubt that barley was domesticated to make beer.
Archaeologist Dr. Pat McGovern backs up the barley for beer theory.
The reason it was domesticated at 9000 BC is that they were using it to make beer.
The proof? Residue from ancient jugs.
Turned out that this residue was what's called beer stone. Now this is evidence then that we had a vessel that would have originally been used for beer.
McGovern has found evidence of beer more than 3,000 years before anyone was baking bread. But hold on a minute. Brewing is a complex science. So how could primitive people have invented beer? Dr. Thomas Shellhammer is a fermentation scientist, a beer boffin. And he thinks they stumbled across it by complete and utter accident.
About 10,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers were collecting wild barley as a source of nutrition. During one of these collections, they were taking barley and placing it into some sort of collection device. This group then go on a hunt.
While they're away, a natural miracle occurs.
First, we get some rains, and these rains moisten that barley, and that barley begins to grow.
As it grows, it produces sugars. Now it needs more water. Luckily, it rains again.
And at this point, we have a substantial amount of rain, enough rain that this vessel becomes basically full with liquid.
Now the real magic happens. Wild yeast converts the barley sugars into CO2 and alcohol. A few days later, the hunters return.
And they look inside this vessel and they see a bubbly mixture. And someone takes the chance to actually taste it. And taking a taste, they think, wow, this is something that's very, very different. This is the very first accidental beer, and from this point on, things will never be the same.
Humans hadn't touched a drink in 3 million years of evolution. Suddenly, life looked a lot more interesting.
They said, this stuff is good. How can we make more of that?
Today, experts like Dr. Hayes believe it was beer's feel-good factor that changed the world forever.
The intoxicating effects of that beer surely persuaded people to continue propagating barley. And that in turn starts this whole cascade of inventions that make for better beer.
The thirst for more beer and more barley to make it with created an explosion of new technologies in a domino effect.
You're going to get tired of going out with a stick and trying to poke a hole into hard ground. And so what does that lead to? Well, that's going to lead to the plow. Once you start opening up ground, some of that ground is not going to be suitable for agriculture unless you irrigate it.
A host of inventions we still rely on today came about thanks to a taste for beer.
Once you start raising all of this food, you don't want to go dragging it around behind you. So what do you have? You have wheeled carts to transport the stuff.
More beer plus more barley equals more farms and the invention of math.
It was beer that made them go in and study how to divide borders between their fields, and which led to mathematics. And so we can even say that math and measurement came about because of beer.
After land surveys came bookkeeping and beer's greatest early invention: writing.
Beer invented writing?
The written language?
No way, that's impossible.
Impossible, but true. Dr. Stephen Tinney is an expert in ancient texts.
The reason for inventing writing was the need to record the production and distribution of commodities like beer.
The beer trade created record keeping. Symbols on clay tablets that evolved into writing. In the first ever written language, called cuneiform, this is the word for beer. And it's everywhere in the ancient dictionary called the word lists.
One of the most important word lists has over 160 different words relating to beer.
That's more than the Eskimos have for snow. That's how important beer was.
Beer was essential to the people, essential for their nutrition, and essential to the origin of writing.
So beer ended hunter-gathering, started agriculture, invented the plow and the wheel, and gave us math and writing. By 3000 BC, civilization was in full flow, all thanks to beer. But it was only just getting started. Coming up, how beer built the pyramids.
It's just mind-boggling.
Of all ancient civilizations, this is the big one. But now, Egyptologists are discovering its wonders exist thanks to a secret ingredient. Beer.
Ancient Egyptian civilizations would not have existed without beer, and beer in great quantities.
I don't think there was anyone in ancient Egypt that didn't have the right to drink beer, even small children.
The ancient Egyptians saw beer as a gift of the gods.
The most powerful of all the Egyptian gods was Re. He is the creator of life, love, and beer in this world and the next.
They consumed it all the time, and when they died, they would go to the afterlife hoping that they would continue consuming beer in great quantities.
This inscription on an Egyptian tomb answers the age-old question, how many beers do you need in the next world?
He asked for 1,000 jugs of beer that he hoped to take advantage of in his afterlife.
The pyramids are the ultimate icons of the afterlife. Just how they were built remains a mystery, especially when you learn how workers were paid.
The daily rations, the wages of ancient Egypt were paid in beer.
They would be given a chit that would say, you have earned 50 jars of beer. It was almost as if it was a debit card.
To Egyptians, beer was money. Today, a few noble individuals still trade in beer.
I'll do somebody's laundry for a 6-pack of high-quality beer.
I'd help someone move.
I don't know if I should say, because if this is out there, my parents will see.
Our modern beer economy might buy you a favor. Back then, it would buy you a pyramid. The going rate for a pyramid builder was a whopping gallon of beer a day.
So it was just an incredible amount of beer that went into building the pyramids.
It takes a gut-busting 231,414,717 gallons of beer to build the Pyramid of Giza. The reason? Ancient beer was a vital source of nutrition.
Beer was absolutely fundamental to the Egyptians. It was one of their very basic foodstuffs.
Beer was one of the main foods in ancient Egypt. It wasn't just a question of being a beverage. Even a schoolboy would get up in the morning and have a dish of beer.
This ancient beer, we'll call it Pyramid Light, was very low in alcohol, but packed with minerals and vitamins, which kept the ancients strong, healthy, and astonishingly productive.
We wouldn't have the pyramids if it weren't for beer.
So, beer built the pyramids and was Egypt's staple food and its common currency. I know what you're thinking. Next, he's going to tell me that beer cured the sick. Well, actually, it did. Beer was used to treat all sorts of ailments.
They treated the diseases of the gums with beer. And they actually even used some of the remains of the beer, the grains, and burned them and produced an anal fumigant to treat diseases of the bowel.
That particular remedy may have gone out of fashion. But ancient beer really did pioneer a startling revolution in medicine 3,000 years before its time. Dr. George Armelagos is a professor of anthropology. He studies mummified bones to find out how ancient Egyptians used to live.